guys, how's it going? So this morning I just want to put together one container that just epitomizes fall. I want it to be full, I want it to be colorful. I think this container is perfect. In fact, I bought this 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, and we used it in a fall container video when we lived in our townhouse. So it's kind of fun to let this pot resurface again and use it. I'm not even sure where it's going to go in the landscape, but I was just excited when I was kind of looking through the greenhouse last night and saw how beautiful these things are looking, like they're just coming into their own and like in their prime right now. So I think what I'm going to do is just kind of talk you through the process, and I'll talk about each plant as I'm putting it in the container. So I've got potting soil here. I think it's going to take, I've got 4 bags. This one was kind of ripped. So let me find that hole. Let me get it filled first. Probably should have figured out a spot for this so we don't have to lift it into place, but that's okay. Sometimes we just don't plan very well. Ooh, I think it's just going to take 3. Not even quite 3 bags. I totally misjudged that. So a couple of things before I start with my planting. I think that this pot has a diameter of roughly 2 feet. It might be slightly under that. It is glazed ceramic, so it is a substantial pot. Like it's going to be heavy. We'll want to move this to its spot before we water it in. I filled it all the way up with soil, and I typically do that in our area for most containers unless they're enormous. Like I don't use a filler in the bottom, because for me, I feel like it's so dry and hot here during the summer that the more soil I have around the roots of my plants, it provides more protection from the heat. It helps them retain moisture when it gets colder out. So like for this fall container, as the temperatures get cooler, the more soil around your root balls means the more insulation they have. The cats are totally fighting right here beside me. Can you see them? Hey, so we planted up 3 galvanized troughs out in our new cut flower garden this year, and we did use a bark, like a big chunky bark filler in the bottom of those, because when you're planting annual plants in particular, if it's a really big container, you really don't need to have all of that soil reservoir filled with soil because they'll never utilize it. But that's only on big stuff, and honestly, with the way everything settled in that container and how, like over time, how I felt like it's done, I think I would have, looking back, filled them all the way up with soil anyway. I feel like it wasn't as good for water. Like the water just shot through that soil and we were having to water a little bit more. So I'm just kind of a proponent of filling them all the way with soil unless they're just massive. Another couple things, I don't typically use a slow release fertilizer like you see me use at the beginning of the season, that little granulated stuff that we mix in. I'll either use Biotone starter fertilizer or continuous release from Proven Winners. I don't do that in the fall because they don't need it. This is fresh soil that has nutrients in it, and they're not going to be putting on a lot of growth. And that brings me to my next point, which is I'm going to be using a ton of plants in this container, and you can totally do that in the fall. Make them look full and packed out and abundant because they're not going to be putting on growth. Like if you put them spaced out like you would your summer annuals, your supertunias, they'll never fill in that space, or most likely won't fill in that space by the end of the season, and you'll never have that abundant look. So let's start with our centerpiece plant, which is going to be a purple fountain grass. I always make sure I have a few of these on hand from earlier on in the season. Like this has been in our greenhouse. We've been watering it like it wants to be out of its can really bad. But they're so amazing for fall containers, like so amazing, because they have this just really beautiful texture. They hold up really well. I'm gonna have to break up this root ball, which I don't usually do a lot of, but look at that thing. Not that it's really gonna be rooting out a ton in the next, month and a half, but that makes me feel a little bit better about it. So I am gonna put this right toward the back. So wherever we decide, I'm gonna have to move myself too so I can see you guys. I think that'll look really good right there, and then I'm gonna shift to the side. There, I think that'll work a little bit better. So we have our centerpiece plant. Now you can do these in the center of the container if you're going to be seeing them from, more angles. This one I'm planning on finding a spot just to tuck it in because I'm not going to flank an opening because I don't have a second one of these pots, which I'm kind of kicking myself now. Usually when I pick up pots, I try to get 2 if I can. I get 2 of whatever it is that I'm buying so that I have the capability of using them differently. It's a little harder for me to place single pots around here. We have lots of openings for walkways and things like that where I always seem to need 2. So I'm just creating a little bit of a well right here because our next plant is this gorgeous rose. This is a Oh So Easy double red rose. In the landscape, these are pretty amazing. Now it is red, and I know you guys are going to be surprised to see me using it but I will use red flowers in the fall because I think it just epitomizes fall to me. It goes with the bronze and the orange and the yellow. It just feels very warm. So in the landscape, they grow 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, and they're one of those types of roses that you don't have to deadhead in order for them to keep blooming. Like, they bloom all season long, and I like the fact that they have these really full flowers. I mean, look at how beautiful. They're not huge flowers, but they have this like very nice presence because of all the petals. And they're very disease resistant and insect resistant, so it's not one of those types of roses that you'll have constant issues having to spray all the time. And I think it's a zone 4 through 9. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure. Root ball looks really nice. I might have to come around the front to see how I want to place this. So this is one you could actually put most of these things in the container really early on. Like if you're thinking toward fall, or if you have an event that you're going to be holding in your yard or whatever, you can plant all of these things early in the season and it'll provide a beautiful show up until and through fall. Okay, I'm going to come around because this is kind of a pivotal shrub or a pivotal piece in this container. I want to make sure I have it angled right. Hold on. So I think that's pretty good. Now you can see how I've got it right up next to this grass. You can certainly give it more space, especially if you're planting these things earlier on in the season. The grass will get a lot bigger. You could probably get away with just using a small handful of what I'm putting in this container because it'll have the season to grow. But the reason I'm packing it full is because I just want to give you guys a little bit of inspiration, like color contrast and different plants you can use and think about through the season, because not all of these will you be able to usually find all in the same place in the fall. I know it gets hard because garden centers are typically not stocking their shelves quite as full, getting ready for winter, but it's something to think about. It's hard for me in the spring though, because my mind always goes toward like pinks and purples and things like that. And so I feel like in the fall, I have to make a 100% shift in order to make things look more fallish. But so I've been trying to really keep that in mind more so that I can have some containers that will look really good all through the summer and into the fall. So I'm making a well in this other side and using my next plant that's got some height. And this is a Goldsturm Rudbeckia, which I always love to have some of these in the garden, like big drifts of them, because they're so happy and they're so bright and they bloom for such a long time. And honestly, when the petals leave, their little seed heads right there look beautiful out in the landscape. They provide some forage for wildlife and they look good in cut flower arrangements. So this one typically grows like 2 to 3 feet in the landscape, maybe like 2 feet wide or so. Oh, that's so pretty. Isn't that pretty with the red right there? This grass is like all up in my business. Gah, okay, that might work better. So look at that, we've got 3 good sized plants and we still have so much room. So many possibilities. All right, so the next couple of things I want to use, these are called Radiant Red. They are a perennial mum. So all of these things, well, so far the rose and the Rudbeckia and the mum I can use out in the landscape after I'm done with them in a pot. Now typically I won't buy mums that are bloomed out quite this much so that they last a little bit longer, because you know, mums just don't, once they're in full bloom, they don't last for like too terribly long in the fall, but they're so worth it. Look at this, I'm gonna tuck this right up under here, pack some soil around its roots, and I might add a second one right here. It's the beauty of getting some 4-inchers instead of the great big ones. They're easy to tuck around. Oh, that's pretty with the Rudbeckia, isn't it? I like that a lot. The next plant I'm going to use is this Autumn Frost Hosta on the other side, kind of underneath the rose. I actually don't think I'm going to be able to fit all the plants I brought up here. Are you surprised? Like, that's pretty unusual for me. Usually I find a way to make it happen. So the Autumn Frost, I've planted these several times. I've got areas where I've got big drifts of them. They're just a nice small hosta, growing about 1 foot tall, 2 feet wide in the landscape, and they're just heavily variegated. So they show up really well in a shady spot. And they are a zone 3 through 9, so they're really tough plants. I think this one will look really good kind of tucked in underneath this rose. The contrast will be nice. Well, from my angle, it looks really nice. Look at that. That is so pretty. So you might be wondering too, like about light requirements, because I just put a hosta right underneath a rose. And we know roses is liking full sun, hostas is liking shade. And that's usually true, especially during the summer months. But in the spring and the fall, you can get away with fudging light requirements in containers. Like, I wouldn't plant them out in the landscape improperly whatsoever. But in containers where I know I'm going to just have them for a couple months and then take them apart and plant them in the appropriate spots in the landscape, you can get away with it. And the sun is not near as intense. So this container can go out in full sun right now. The hosta will be totally fine. It won't burn because it's not getting very hot anymore, and it'll keep all of our full sun lovers really happy. So I think I'm going to elevate this one just a little bit. I had it planted a little bit too deep, and I think I've got room for 2 more plants here. So let's do this one right here. This is a Snow Princess lobularia. This is probably one of the toughest blooming annuals I have ever used ever. Aaron, is there anything else that holds up like these? Like, these are beasts in the garden. They get enormous. Like, they'll get this big, one plant. They're not like the little 4 or 6 pack alyssum that you are used to seeing, that just kind of like spread out a tiny bit in the garden. Like, one of these will take up an enormous amount of space. And they bloom all season, no deadheading, and they usually last until Thanksgiving for us here, depending on the year, but a lot of times right up until Thanksgiving. So I'm going to put this right in the front as kind of a pop of bright. I don't think, I've got like a Dichondra Silver Falls over here, but I don't think I want to have anything that's kind of too weeping. I want this to look pretty clean in the end. I actually think I need to add more soil. You do want to make sure that all the root balls are completely covered with soil. No air pockets. Got to keep them happy. And then the last plant here is an ornamental cabbage called Osaka Red. Again, I usually like to buy them in 4 inches and in 6 inches so that I have different sizes to use in different applications. There, that's like quintessential fall. And I have 2 plants left over. Nanner, nanner, Aaron. What do you think? You like it?
That's beautiful.
Have fun. Now, this container, I know some of you are probably like, that's a lot of plants. That's going to add up really quickly. I realize that. But you know, I never mean for these to be paint by number. You know, just take a little bit of inspiration, like 3 plants out of here that you really liked, put those together. You know, you don't have to pack it out quite this full, and you can utilize pumpkins, corn stalks, those things like grass seed heads out of your garden that you can go cut. And instead of buying a grass, you can just pop some corn stalks or something in the back that provide that kind of texture, but it doesn't cost a whole lot of money. I just hope that things like this are inspirational to you, just to see different plants being used, to see how we put them together and how they do, because typically we like to give you updates on how things are growing. And the other thing too is when you're using perennials, so like in this container right here, we've got the hosta, the rose, the rudbeckia, and the mums. All of those, so there's only 3 plants in here that won't actually survive through really cold temperatures. The rest of these, I could essentially just keep them in this pot, keep them watered through the winter, and plant them out in the spring, and they'll be great. So if you kind of plan ahead and think, well, I know I want some of these roses in my garden, or I want this rudbeckia in my garden. So if I plan ahead and I can utilize it in a fall container first, and then put it out in my garden, it's kind of like you got double duty out of it, and then you're not spending all of your budget on fall containers versus stuff that you want to put in your landscape, because you can use them both ways. So anyway, guys, that is it for this video. Just thought it would be fun to get out here and just do a classic fall container. It kind of like, I don't know, whetted my appetite. Now I kind of want to keep going and keep filling up containers around here. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you are having a great day, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.